Well, you're welcome back to the AM Club right here on MX24. If you're just joining in, you made the right choice. My name is Miriam Uduakumenta. We're about to get into our big conversation for this morning. But before we do, tired of dealing with messy hair? Well, I am, okay? We've got your solution, introducing new BO16 styling gel. It effortlessly holds and styles your hair, leaving no white flakes behind. Of course, choose from our original clear or sleek black gel to suit your style. BO16 styling gel, because your hair deserves the best. Express yourself confidently as well. Available now at your nearest store. Grab yours and style with ease. The GC brand, it's all about you. Now, today, we're joined by Nataki Kombong. She's a Pan-African advocate for a discussion. She's actually a Pan-African advocate. And we already kick-started the conversation this morning. It's on housing in Ghana, bridging the gap between locals and diasporan investment. And so again, good morning.
Good morning,
How
Miriam.
are we doing?
We're good this morning. How are you?
I'm blessed. I'm blessed. It's good to see you.
Yes, you too.
How long have you, stayed in Ghana?
Right.
Yeah.
right.
How long have you been here?
I've been coming since I was a teenager.
Okay.
And my mother has been bringing people. And I moved to Ghana in 2019 and have been here ever since.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Yes, I got dual citizenship in 2019, so I'm a Ghanaian.
Oh, you are a Ghanaian?
Yes.
Because for you to understand what it is that's happening in the system, you have stayed there for a while.
Exactly.
And I was telling you earlier that when it comes to the housing issue, of course, we want to bridge the gap, but the gap is not that huge. Again, no matter how small it is, we need to. But I personally was telling you earlier that I personally do not think that is exclusive to diasporans. It gets murky sometimes. It gets really, really terrible sometimes with some people. But generally, it's a Ghanaian problem. Because when you compare it to other countries, like when you go to Nigeria, housing is not that crazy. Right. I mean, with something small, you could get a decent house to live in.
Right.
So half of the influencers have homes that they own. Do you get what I mean? And so it's really a system issue. But I'm going to start from where you see it, your lenses. I've been here all my life. I've lived here all my life. So I guess I'm looking at it from someone who has lived here perspective. But you coming from, the diaspora, just trying to, since 2019, trying to get yourself into the system, what really did you notice and why the conversation?
Right. And I think there's the individual perspective, but I think it's also important to look at national trends and look at what citizens, whether Ghanaian-born citizens or dual citizens, and even residents are observing in terms of trends over the last years. And what we're seeing is plot prices, plots that may have been a few hundred Ghana cedis in 2017, 2018, can now go for 100,000 cedis, $100,000, $200,000. So it's not just, so the gap is there, and we're seeing prices really that are outpacing inflation. There are prices that are outpacing the economy overall. And so we have a number of things. And we're also seeing housing prices, land prices that are outpacing local income. So it impacts historic diasporans, but it is also impacting Ghanaians in ways that it's making it harder for Ghanaians to find housing, especially in some of the metropolitan or peri-urban places. And it's definitely a conversation and a topic that needs to be addressed, because what happens when someone who was born in Ghana, who's lived in Accra their whole life, can no longer afford to stay in the capital city of their country?
Indeed. Now, tell us your lived experience. When you were trying, did you ever, of course you did, try to purchase a property in Ghana. Well, tell me your experience. What was it?
Yeah, I had not had great successes purchasing property in Ghana, but we recognize that 90% of the court cases in Ghana are related to housing. And that's, I have to explain to people who are just coming in or from outside the country this is not a socioeconomic issue. It's not an educational issue. People can think, oh, okay, well, you're a silly diasporan. You made a mistake, but I was in a meeting with several lawyers, and the lawyers were telling me about their court cases. And it wasn't that they're not smart lawyers or good lawyers, but if there was something underhanded along the way, then even a good lawyer, lawyers are not always there to just prevent problems. Lawyers are there to solve problems that will inevitably come up in broken systems. And so all of these things are coming into play. Some of the challenges that I had in terms of purchasing or leasing property is actually what propelled me to use my business background, my AI and technology background, and all these things to do advocacy for real estate reform in Ghana.
Interesting. Now, let's just backtrack a little bit and talk about the cultural shocks you had in that particular area. Let's talk about them.
Yeah. So I'm from the United States, if you couldn't tell from my accent, and the real estate industry there is very different. I owned a construction company for a number of years. I'm a girly girl. I never thought I would be in the construction industry, but you can be in your heels and cute shoes and a dress in the office. You don't have to be in steel-toe boots in the field. But no, even whether we were doing affordable homes or high-end condos, the real estate industry is very transparent. All of the data about property ownership can be found online through county tax records. It's very transparent. Property listings are all transparently online. You can trace things from start to finish. If you are scammed in that way, you would have to have turned a blind eye to the whole process. It just does not happen that way. Not to say that people don't get taken advantage of, but it's more often on a rental side when someone doesn't do due diligence than it would be on a purchase side, because everything is so transparent and the closing process is so tight that it doesn't happen. One other factor there is because things are going through, the misconception in Ghana is that Americans, historic diasporans or not, just have oogobs of money. They have plenty money. But when it comes to housing and real estate, most people do not have that kind of money. They have credit, which allows them access to borrow money in great amounts through banks and other lending institutions. And because the banks are not going to let you get defrauded, because the credit and lending institutions are not going to let you get defrauded, there are checks and balances in place to make sure that this deal is checked all along the way. And because of the absence of that system here, we're seeing that it's just somebody saying, I've got land, you've got money, how do I get your money into my pocket with whatever land I genuinely have, or maybe it's not genuine. So that's some of the differences that we see. In terms of here, you get people who want to, on one hand, embrace foreign practices, embrace foreign pricing, but then when you attempt to have discussions about foreign systems, you hear, well, that's not how we do it in Ghana.
But you're trying to let me pay
in dollars.
In dollars.
In euros. Yes.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure that things are standardized. We need to make sure that systems are transparent, and we need to make sure that Ghanaians and foreigners and historic diasporans are all protected under the same types of real estate reform, because one of the other things that might be controversial, but it should be said, is that when we look at other metropolitan cities, even in places like the United States, or if we look at countries like South Africa or Australia, we recognize that there are places that have been predominantly black. Countries like Australia that were black countries that within 100 years were no longer black. Most people don't know that Australia was black.
Yeah.
But how did that happen? How is it that Australia is no longer black, right? I was born in Brooklyn, New York. There's an area of Brooklyn, New York called Bedford-Stuyvesant. When my parents left Bedford-Stuyvesant, I'll go back further. I think somewhere around, I want to say like 1990 or so, 1980, 1990, Bedford-Stuyvesant was 75% black. And now what you see with what's called gentrification, which is Europeans coming in, they're not killing people, they're not doing anything, but they're changing the market. They're driving prices up. My parents' house sold, I think they sold it for $100,000. And it's now worth $1.7 million. So if you're not looking at real estate reform, what happens is you can just price people out of living in the country, living in the city, living in the area. So now when you look at Brooklyn, New York, which used to be, you could go to Brooklyn, New York for 2 months, maybe you'd never see a white person in Bed-Stuy. Now, there are almost no black people. I think it's 22% black now.
Oh, goodness.
And what happens...
An area that was predominantly black.
100%. And what happens is what we're seeing here. If property owners, what happened there is people aged out. People were like, I don't want to live in New York anymore. Oh, I don't want my mother's house, my grandmother's house. So as white people came in, they slowly started buying up properties one at a time. And we see that in Ghana. Oh, this king here, this person here. Oh, I just want to sell this one property. And they see it as one property. But when it becomes a national policy, an unspoken national policy on an individual level, where the entire market is being sold to outsiders, we begin to see that entire communities, there are large Lebanese communities and German communities and others. And we're starting to see that large pockets of Accra and other places are no longer being owned by people who look like us.
You make such a salient point. And I am seeing the real problem here. What could potentially be like one of the biggest problems we would have to now start tackling? Because, in the business world now, let's talk fashion, let's talk grocery, let's talk the big supermarkets. They're not Ghanaian-owned companies. Right. And that's because these properties that we're selling out, we're not selling out at prices that Ghanaians could afford. And note that some of these diasporans or some of these foreigners, in this case, acquire loan facilities that have great percentage. Yeah, what do you call it? What's the word for it?
Great terms in terms of their...
Let's call it terms. Great terms. So they're able to bring such amounts to Ghana to run these businesses. So they really, like you said, we're having large pockets of, communities that are becoming predominantly foreign.
Right. And now think of how we're contributing to the problem, because we can't just say, oh, it's them. I tell people all the time, I will go out of my way. I'm in Ghana. I go out of my way to buy everything I can from a Ghanaian-owned business. But if you say, well, it's convenient to go over there to this thing because it's cheap, you are putting other Ghanaians out of business, and you're exporting you can be in Ghana and export all of your dollars to people who don't look like you, who are then exporting that money outside of this country to their own country. And so we're literally creating an economy where we are not supporting Ghana. And so I love what President Mahama is doing with some of the things that, and regardless of your politics, you don't have to be MPP or NDC to appreciate policies and shifts where we say we need to be eating our own local crops. We need to be buying our own products that are manufactured in Ghana. We need factories. We need all of these things. And we do need the bipartisan politics of NPP and NDC, making sure that on the fair market side, that there are incentives for people to buy local, buy Ghanaian. It shouldn't just be on March 6th or Farmers Day that we get excited about Ghana. We should be excited about Ghana every time we spend one CD, one peswa.
Indeed. Now let's go back to how diasporans also are contributing to this market rising significantly. What are some of the mistakes that diasporans are making to make this market boom?
Yeah, it's really ignorance, and that's the most that we can say. It's ignorance of and it's, well, I'll say it this way. There's not one diasporan. People come for different reasons. I say all the time, some of us are Pan-African or super pro-Black, and we come here because we really want to connect with our people, our culture, our heritage. Some people are like, hey, I'm old. I don't want to retire to maybe Florida like Jewish people do. I want to retire to a tropical environment. with all people who look like me, and that's Ghana. So not everyone is coming with like an altruistic. Some people have, you know, just whatever motivations. But the mistake people make is someone from England, someone from Canada, someone from Jamaica, thinking that this is like an interstate move within your own country. You will be blindsided with things that work in such phenomenally different ways that if you are not preparing yourself, if you're not connecting with the people, organizations, and institutions that actually help people through this process, you will lose thousands of dollars. You will lose your livelihood. We hear stories about people, oh, I spent all my money on a property and it was a problem. Oh, my lease had a problem, it was a problem. Oh, I couldn't find this, I couldn't find that. I had to go back to my country and I lost everything. And so these are real stories, and there's an organization called the Black Agenda that is working on, they're having these town hall meetings on what are people experiencing and how do we identify those so that as more people come, we can recognize what systems are in place and what systems aren't. There's another organization called DOOR, the Decade of Our Repatriation. And DOOR is, if we have a decade of historic diasporans moving to Ghana, how do we ensure that it's not a national takeover? How do we ensure that it is Ghanaians and diasporans growing and building together, where Ghanaians are benefiting from the skills share, the entrepreneurship, the expertise, the Ghana pride. A lot of the Ghana pride we're seeing now is I think a resurgence of, look how proud these people are of something that we may have thought didn't have significance because of colonization and all these other things. So I think the diasporan experience has been one that has been very clouded by just ignorance, thinking you can just walk into a new country, and also when you come from colonial countries like the UK and the United States and Canada, specifically those three, France even, you are instilled with a level of ethnocentrism that even if you're a Pan-Africanist, you don't realize you have. You're instilled with I am the center of the world, and everyone else is like I'm a spectator and an observer looking at everyone else in the world. And it's very easy to not recognize that ethnocentrism in yourself and think that I am smarter, or I am smart enough. It's not even a comparative. I am smart enough to navigate this without outside help. And that is the pitfall.
Yeah. And so for diasporans who are trying to get into the system, how difficult is it to access information? So for instance, I want to come to Ghana, I want to experience Ghana, but I need the right information, like you're saying, like you need to be educated. Of course, you might have found something exciting about Ghana for you to want to be in Ghana, or just the thought of, I want to be in Africa, and then the Ghana thought comes in. How easy or how difficult is it to get information?
It is difficult, and that's why even the two groups and some of the community organizations are working to help resolve that. The reality is that when the year of return was announced, as someone who does marketing, it was a brilliant piece of marketing. It was not backed by legislation, it wasn't backed by policy, and that misunderstanding by people who came thinking, oh wow, there's an entire pathway for me to move here, really left a lot of people finding out the hard way. So it's now that there are groups and organizations who are sitting down with the the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Interior and Office of Diaspora Affairs, and even other leaders from the Office of the President to figure out how do these pathways happen. I think it's important to recognize that it's not the government who needs to, the government is responsible for policy and making a hospitable place for the policy to be enforced. The government should be, and this is my opinion, other diasporans may have a different opinion, but I don't think that if we recognize that the Ghanaian government has its hands full now ensuring that Ghanaian-born Ghanaians, and even the Ghanaian diasporans, those who are born in Ghana but lived outside, they're trying to make sure there's infrastructure in place for the millions of youth who can't find jobs, for the millions of people who are also finding a housing shortage, for the millions of other problems with electricity and water and all these things. It is not going to be, it's not feasible for the government to deprioritize all of those or try and fix a budget for all of those and simultaneously figure out a whole pathway for historic diasporans. Yeah. So groups and organizations like DOOR and the Black Agenda and others, the African American Association of Ghana and the Ghana Caribbean Association and these, can help their constituents have a voice, weigh in on how policy is affecting them and these kinds of things. I think that's the best way to bridge that gap and not expect that the government of Ghana should provide for me. If anything, not in a whatever kind of way, people who are coming in should say, how can I be supporting the government? Civic engagement is important. You can't just come and hope things will magically be in place. You should be getting involved. Do you know your local politicians? Do you know your MPs? Do you know, do you even know do you even know where you live? So, these kinds of things are important. But if you don't know what you don't know, then it's challenging. Yeah. And I would say it should not be that you just saw a YouTube video and this happens. My brother specifically helps people move to Ghana. He will get calls. So-and-so is at the airport. They didn't know they needed a visa. They're trapped at the airport and they can't get out. They need help. How did you get in the country?
Without a visa?
Yes. So, people come, so-and-so. I personally know people who lost businesses. They poured hundreds of thousands of dollars and they are now penniless and had to get help flying back to their home country because they trusted their Uber driver. They trusted their, and it's not, and it's very easy to do. Oh, this person is likable. They want to help me. They trusted their real estate agent. Having a lawyer is great, but not every lawyer is an honest lawyer. In the United States, they have people they call ambulance chasers. They're just waiting for an accident. In Ghana, it's shifted more from the ambulance chasing to, this person's gonna buy a property. I can facilitate that. So there are all these things that if you don't know what you don't know, you're just blind to all of these things. But if we're looking on the positive side, real estate reform should be happening on multiple levels. Real estate reform should be happening on a governmental level. Yeah. It's fantastic that we're seeing the Real Estate Agency Council now enforcing some of these laws and ensuring that real estate agents are licensed. Before January 1st, you literally could just wake up one day and decide, I would like to be a real estate agent. I would like to be a real estate broker. And there was nothing that said you couldn't be. And so now we're seeing that the policy is in place. Next, we need to see the enforcement. Right as you drive down the N4, the J.J. Rawlings Highway, how many billboards are you seeing or signs are you seeing from people who don't have a real estate license? They're damaging the industry because we're now having policies that can help people, but if everybody is not following those policies, then it ends up with the broken system that ultimately hurts the average diasporan and the average Ghanaian who needs a fair real estate market that is based on current economic trends and the current economy and the current wage base that we have and the current market and not speculative. Speculative is when you just say, oh, I'm going to build a $500,000 house or $500,000 two-bedroom apartment that the average person wouldn't even buy in their home country. Yeah. I'm going to build that and I'm going to sell it because I know the money is coming.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, we've been having great conversations here about the real estate industry and its effects on the diasporan community. We're bridging the gap. We're trying to bridge the gap. And I love this conversation because our guest here, she has a wealth of knowledge about this industry. In fact, far more than I am learning things. So you know what we say here, we're learning and growing together. Now, someone would tell you that, and again, you have conversations with people, that when this topic came up, I did talk to a few people, and the question was that, well, the conversation was that these aspirants, they are contributing to the high prices that we have, they are destroying the market. The reason being that they're ready and always ever ready to pay these amounts to these people. And so then the average Ghanaian gets to suffer because their diasporans can't pay. And so they won't pay because in that case, you know, then if someone can pay for it, then I'm not even going to bother my head over you who cannot pay. What do you say about that?
So I think it's very easy to get lost in the blame game. Oh, I'm going to blame the diasporan because they're coming and they have the money.
Yeah.
But I think if we're going to play the blame game, we need to recognize that it's on both sides. If you come into a country and you're ignorant and you don't, and not ignorant in a derogatory way, but lacking knowledge that you are about to pay $100,000 for something that should cost you 30,000 Ghana, that is on you. And you are damaging the country with your lack of knowledge. However, for those who woke up one day and decided, I am going to go from maybe what I feel like is poverty to wealth by overcharging people, we also need to hold Ghanaians accountable because it is it's the real estate agent and the real estate broker who has decided it's in their best interest to get the highest commission they can by overcharging people from properties that they just sold the other property for this price, but I'm going to charge you this. There are stories that Ghanaian homeowners have. I can't get my property rented or sold because the real estate agents want it to be sold for higher than I'm even asking them for. So they're not showing my property to people. What do I do? And so I've been talking with people about how do we leverage digital platforms, AI, honest, licensed real estate agents and brokers to overcome these situations, because the problem that Ghanaian homeowner who's trying to sell his house at a reasonable price is facing is that he's not surrounded by industry professionals that have the integrity to sell it at what the fair market is demanding. And if I'm a diasporan or a foreigner or whoever coming in, and I can't find an agent who wants to sell me properties. I had someone recently last year, she said, I only sell $1 million properties in Ghana. So what kind of trend are we going to have? How are you and your children and your grandchildren or great-grandchildren going to be able to afford to live in Accra and Ghana if everything is now $1 million property, but the average wage is 2,500 Ghana cedis a month, 10,000 Ghana cedis a month? In their lifetime, in their entire lifetime, they will never earn enough to even put down a down payment or get a loan to live in any properties that are anywhere in that range.
Let's talk about the mortgage system that works great in America.
Yes.
Over here, the conversation is quite different. Have you tried, inquiring of the mortgage system and how does it work?
Yes,
I mean, comparing the two.
Well, comparing the two, there's definitely no comparison. I mean, obviously you have a 100-year head start in the United States, but I think there are people who are looking at not just the mortgage system, but the escrow system. An escrow system would help. So for viewers who don't know, the mortgage system is you have a job, you have a consistent job. In Ghana, it would probably most likely be a government job because the employment system is not built in a way that it would really support a mortgage system well, in my opinion, right now.
I agree with you.
But you have a consistent job where you're being paid, and your credit and your income, your cash flow is used for you to borrow against, so you don't have to come up with the full lump sum. The people can get their money at a go, and you can pay back the lender over time, whether it's a bank or a mortgage lending company. So we don't really have that here. On the other side, that's on the purchasing side, but on the construction side, you also have escrow payments. And if we had escrow payments more, there are people who are doing that here in Accra, and I heard of one in Kumasi. Escrow payments is you don't just give a builder the entire thing to build a house and you walk away and hope you'll find a house one day. In Ghana, it won't happen. You'll come back. So
you'll come back and not find the land itself.
Exactly. The whole city is gone. So the village. So what happens is you put the money in an escrow account that you are both attached to, both the builder and you, the buyer, are attached to, and the builder gets money in phases based on milestones of completion. And so it's your protection because all of the due diligence, was there a land survey? Was there, did it go through all of these processes? Before any money is released, it has to go through these processes. Yeah. Oh, they have to have built to this level, or they have to clear the land, all of these. And the final payment is based on a third party coming in and doing due diligence. In order for people to even benefit from both systems, I would say that we have to let go of, that's not how we do it in Ghana. Because we don't
have the moral right to say that's not how we do it in Ghana.
Right.
Because that's like double standard. Looking at what we're doing already, we cannot say that's not how we do it in Ghana, but you can go ahead.
We can charge $1 million for a property, but you can't ask me for due diligence. You can't ask me to verify I own the land. That's not how we do it. Right. Yeah. So.
Interesting. Well, it's a big conversation. As we get deeper, I see how huge the issue is. Yeah. And we can start a conversation now. We can keep pushing the agenda for a more robust system to favor the Ghanaian people and obviously the historic diasporan. But
because it has to be both. It can't be one or the other. So if someone, I don't call myself a Pan-African advocate. I like the framing of it for this, but as a historic diasporan, it is my belief, and it's the belief of many of us who came here because we wanted to reconnect with our culture, that we're supposed to be growing and building together, both metaphorically and literally in terms of, construction or housing or real estate. It doesn't work if I, as a historic diasporan, can live fine, but the Ghanaians who I came to be with are struggling and suffering. I often advocate, it's not so much on the housing reform side, but I implore employers who are coming and building businesses. You can't come and build a business here and get excited about, I don't have to pay people competitive wages. I can charge people in these dollars, and then I can pay Ghanaians low salaries. So it has to be an overall, we are doing this together, we're building together, we're stepping up together, and not taking advantage of the gaps. And what we're seeing now in terms of the need for real estate reform is bad actors in terms of real estate agents and real estate brokers who are bad actors taking advantage of the ignorance of people or the fact that people think they have money, because what was no money in the U.S. feels like a lot when you multiply it times 10 here.
Yeah, it is.
And it can give people a level of hubris. So we need to grow together, and we need to make sure that the bad actors in terms of agents, builders, real estate brokers of the past are no longer relevant, no longer have a place, no longer have a voice, no longer have an audience, and work towards making sure that your great-great-grandchildren, my great-great-nieces and nephews can live in Accra, afford Accra, and we can start to make sure that the huge pockets that are going to other communities also have a strongly Ghanaian presence.
Now, before we wrap up the conversation, which has been so far great, and you are incredibly amazing. You have touched on every. In fact, when I'm looking through, as I go through my questions, like, she answered this a few minutes ago. I can't go into that. So thank you so much. Thank you. You've been incredibly amazing. Now, before we wrap up the conversation, looking ahead, what practical steps should be taken to truly bridge the gap between locals and a diasporan investor?
Okay. From a real estate perspective.
Yeah,
okay. So, because I've ventured into employment and all that, but from a real estate perspective, and I want to qualify something. I went through the process through REAC and the Real Estate Agency Council, and I got a real estate broker's license in November, December of last year.
Beautiful.
And people are like, wait, that's not what you do for a living. Are you now planning to show houses? And no. I am not getting into real estate for any reason that has to do with transactional. Yeah. But from a system standpoint, I recognize that the experiences that I had losing money in rental or lease and land purchases if we're going to talk about reform, you have to reform things through the systems that are working. And that's where I think one of the answers starts. How do we bridge the gap? There is now a real estate agency council. People need to be able to go recognize that, okay, I had someone 2 weeks ago who said, oh, I'm running into a problem. I know you're a broker. But can you help me? I still want to work with the broker I have and the lawyer I have. He's not licensed, but so you're setting yourself up for failure. Yeah. One, if we're looking at solutions, let's break it down to 3. One, you have to rely on the licensed legal system and not try and skirt the system because you think in the short run it serves your interest. You have to be willing to walk away from a deal if someone is not willing to do the right steps and transparency. Yes. 2, we have to put things in writing. I tell people all the time, if you run into someone who is scared of documenting something, let them walk away. I have never seen someone walk away from a deal and then later go, oh, wow. People, contracts and things in writing are what guarantee your rights. And I'm glad that is even shifting in the rental side of this market, because you had landlords. It's typical here. A landlord will say, show me your concern, pay me your money first, and then you get a lease. But then you don't know what the lease contains, and maybe it's not in your best interest. So the documentation. 3rd, we need to make sure that there are clear pathways to information for Ghanaians to understand what their rights are, what they have access to, and especially for homeowners, because if your grandmother and your great-grandmother and your auntie and your siblings all sell their land to people who don't look like them, then what is Ghana going to look like in 100 years? It's going to look like Australia or Brooklyn or Atlanta.
I want to say it, that we're almost there.
We are.
I mean, you go to all the exciting places in Ghana, and there are no Ghanaians, really.
Yeah.
And how are the Ghanaians over there are speaking like you?
Yeah, and I go to places, and I'm one of the only people wearing African clothes.
I was at a party, I'm not going to specify the date because people will know where I was. I was at a party very recently, and half of the room was white. Yeah. I'm like, this is really getting interesting. I didn't even look at it as, oh, they're taking over. It's really like, oh, we're really coexisting. But now it's and again, we're not sitting here championing a no white Ghana. We're just saying that let's not make Ghana so difficult for the Ghanaians, so much so that they cannot live in it.
Right.
Like, it's just really, really sad. Oh my goodness. So like I said earlier, this conversation has been incredibly amazing. We've touched on areas that I did not even see coming because I thought we're going to stay in a certain box. But when you're sitting with a brilliant woman, she will take you all around the place and bring you right back to where we started, because she said, you know what, can I go back to real estate? Because but I'm really glad that we have done that. And because for you this morning, if you're looking at coming to Ghana to, acquire a property, which a lot of the diasporans or the historic diasporans are doing, then it means that you need to have the right information to get here. And that's what we're trying to do this morning, to give out the right information, because that's the biggest problem.
And we're trying to reform the industry and start conversations around reform so that all of the key players, from the Lands Commission to REACT to buyers, sellers, agents, and brokers, have one transparent system that they're working in, so that you can know, I can move forward with transparency. And you can also do it using prices that make sense. And we've been talking with even some kings of regions in other regions about how they're dealing with land, because what some foreigners are doing is they're going and they're buying hundreds of acres at a time and building communities that people don't even know are there. So we're imploring kings to not just see this as an opportunity to get a windfall of cash, but if you want your kingdom to exist for your people, then there needs to be a larger reform conversation about who's buying land and how and at what prices.
Indeed. Ms. Haki, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Miriam.
How do we connect with you? I know you're big on social media.
Yeah, I'm more on LinkedIn than anything.
Okay.
Again, in terms of real estate reform, there's not necessarily a platform that I am connected to, but I am working with the Decade of Our Repatriation, which is decadeofourrepatriation.com. I can be found at LinkedIn, Nataki Kanban. I am on Instagram, not much, Nataki Kanban. And I can give out a phone number. The phone number, if you want to connect and talk about real estate reform, sister's got to be clear because sometimes, sometimes people are like, oh, I wanted her number. If you want to talk about real estate reform, you can contact 024 353 0110. And that's for people who are in the real estate, construction, et cetera, industry, who want to have conversations and who want to be part, because like I said, I'm not doing transactional kinds of things, but I do want to be a bridge to those agents, those property owners who are trying to sell, and just make sure that it's done transparently.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Nataki, for coming through.
Thank you.
Like I said earlier, we have been having conversations with Nataki. She is a Pan-African advocate. She said it's a very fancy, couching of her name or her designation, but she would use that for today.
Yes.
She would use that for today. But again, we're just finished having conversations with her, and I hope you've learned a thing or two. And even as a Ghanaian, this is also very important information for you, so I hope you grabbed that. But before we go for a quick break, now, happy birthday, Kwame T. Wishing you a day filled with joy, laughter, and everything that makes you happy. May this new year bring you more success, good health, and amazing opportunities. Keep shining and doing great things. This is your season. Enjoy your day to the fullest. From Gabby Grant, a happy birthday to you. Now that's the birthday boy on the screens. Happy birthday to you, Kwame T. Happy birthday to a friend who makes every day brighter. Cheers to another year of laughter and memories. Happy birthday, Christabel. Happy birthday to Christabel as well. Yes, that's Christabel on the screens right there. From Champ, happy birthday to you. And apparently is a girlfriend of the house. Okay, so happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you, girlfriend of the house. Where she's standing is the Despite Museum, eh? Guess. Gabby, you have to take me to this Despite Museum. I've never been. You have to take Amanda and I. Amanda, manager. Maybe you are taking me to Despite Museum. Well, thank you so much for coming, Nataki, and to you who stayed right here to watch. Thank you for staying with us. We'll be right back after this.